So, as usual, I have more questions.
Yes.
This one's kind of fun and mystical and all of that because we've been hearing about it forever. I've been told often in my life that I have psychic ability, and then I, of course, have no idea or awareness of whether or not I do. I just know that I know things at certain times, and I know that you know a lot about this topic. So, please, do people have psychic abilities?
Psychic abilities. Everybody has a certain amount of psychic ability, and where it comes from oftentimes is being in the womb, and there is a great connection between the fetus, between the baby and the mother, and since the baby doesn't have verbal communication, the communication oftentimes in the womb is psychic. And the mind of the baby and the mind of the mother are very intimately connected, so that there is communication between baby and mother in the womb, and they develop a language to understand how each other is doing, and that language is psychic. So psychic abilities can be developed. This is where they come from. So yes, everybody has a certain amount of being psychic. So then people want to know, well, if I'm psychic in terms of my spiritual path, what does that mean? And there is a certain amount of paranormal and psychic development that happens to people who have a spiritual development, a real spiritual development, that where they clear subconscious issues and their mind becomes more psychic. Now that's not the important part of your spiritual path. It's what's called paranormal abilities. It's called your psychic fireworks or your spiritual fireworks. So the most important part of a spiritual path is being present and being aware. And the side effects of a true spiritual path can be the development of psychic capabilities. There's an interesting ability that's been developed in the last 20 or 30 years that is called remote viewing. Remote viewing was developed by the US government, but basically remote viewing is the ability to see events and even different times in history through what's known as your third eye. And through this vision, which is actually just the opening of your third eye, you have the ability to have what's called spiritual insight, which is also called psychic capabilities. There's different kinds of psychic capabilities. Now, to get fixated on the ability rather than continuing to develop compassion and awareness on your spiritual path is a mistake from true spiritual development. It's getting caught up in the light show as opposed to continuing to develop compassion and develop awareness. But it can be a side effect that's very interesting. So yes, there is such a thing as psychic communication, and it's interesting from the point of view of, if you haven't thought about it before, it's an interesting topic. The most important thing is that a person stays in development of their own consciousness, working through their own personal issues, clearing their subconscious, and focusing on learning about body language, which can also make you more psychic to be able to understand what certain movements that people are doing mean. If I have a headache, it tends to mean that I have too much thinking going on, so that people sometimes think people are psychic when they're really very good at reading body language. True psychic ability is developed from spiritual awakening, awareness, and developing remote viewing skills, opening the third eye, but it's not the end of the show. People who get fixated on opening their third eye probably need to focus on opening their heart chakra, and if you open your heart chakra, the rest of all the capabilities and the fireworks and the cool things and the neat things that happen on a spiritual path will happen naturally. So it's better to focus on your heart chakra rather than getting fixated on psychic abilities so that you can know about other people, it's much more difficult but much more effective to learn about oneself and continue to develop one's own awareness and release your subconscious as the focus.
So, so what I hear you saying is, in my perspective of what you're saying is that to focus in on your psychic ability or any of the so-called extra abilities that people can have, channeling, blah, 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 is like a distraction to keep you from really growing from within. And so, and then you also talked about chakras and that opening the heart chakra was a good place to start. So I hear you saying the same thing over again. If you start with your heart, that means you're starting with yourself and not to let anything distract you from really doing that.
Most people on a spiritual path who have the greatest intention and are lucky enough and have the good karma enough to find a real spiritual teacher or a guru or somebody who can help them open their chakras or open their mind, tend to make a little progress, and they start to get some results. They're cleaning off some of the dirt from their mind, and things start to get clearer. And one thing that happens is you start to get insight into other people. Most people at this point start to focus on that as the most important aspect of their development, and it is a distraction. To focus on what's going on with other people denies the fact that you are creating your environment through your own mind and your own spiritual progress. So for me to get fixated on what it is about you that's interesting, or what it is about you that I can figure out so I can know what you're going to do next, or be able to figure out what you're about, so that, let's say I want to figure that out so that I can be one step ahead of you. Then what I'm really saying is that I have a fear that you could outdo me, and I'm trying to figure you out instead of dealing with my own fear. So a true spiritual student and real spiritual progress is somebody who would be able to figure out, obviously, I'm trying to learn about this sideshow, the psychic abilities, as a way to distract myself from putting my attention on my own path and realizing that I'm creating the fireworks and I am creating my perception of how I observe you, whether I feel you're competitive with me and so I need to be psychically aware of you. That's all a distraction from realizing maybe it's my own fear that I need to be dealing with. Maybe I need to go and get additional sessions of body work or breath work and focus psychologically on my own stuff, my own issues. And that's actually more important and is more difficult, but develops a more spiritual progress.
Okay, that was a lot different than I expected, but a lot more insightful and gives me a little bit more direction on how to pay more attention to oneself. And you'd be happy to give us help with any one of these by going to your website?
Sure. www.lulu.com/Trent Inspires. And you can also email me at trentnelsonинspires@hotmail.com. Or you can phone me at 651 area code 894-2770, and I'd be happy to answer questions about true spiritual progress. This is after 13 years of spiritual seeking and study, travel, and 6 years of study with a former Tibetan Buddhist monk, and developing a bit of insight into these topics. So.
Great, thank you so much. And all you psychics out there, feel free to give him a call, and he'd be glad to go into a little bit more detail about that as well, I'm sure.
But I might know you're calling.
Okay.